Sweet. Yeah, so welcome back to another governance call with Celo. We're going to go over a few items today. We have a really exciting agenda. But before we get started, I just want to point out that there's a few governance proposals going to hit referendum stage today, like the contract release to CGP 17 and CGP 20. I believe on-chain their proposals 18 to 20, so make sure you vote for them. Yeah, let's get started. So the first item on the agenda is CIP 33, moving to last call. So as you all know, CIP 33 is the Celo Euro specification proposal. So this proposal is basically how do we add a second stable asset, which is Celo Euro in this case, to the protocol and stuff. And like, all the analysis and stuff done on adding a secondary asset and stuff. So as a specification, it's pretty much like in the final version of draft stage, and it's ready to hit last call. What happens when we go to last call? Basically, we have like 1.5 to 2 week period time where it's open for review. So everyone would have to, take a look at it, look at the specification, read about it and stuff. And if you find any critical issues with it that might, impact either the Celo blockchain or something that is like a misspecification, we would have to take it back out of the review stage back to draft stage. But if nothing happens, then the specification on its own is suitable enough to move to accepted state. When it's an accepted state, then the only other criteria are how do we go about activating Celo Euro, allocating and stuff, and that like separate than the specification of Celo Euro itself. We covered Celo Euro before in our previous calls, and so let me admit, yeah. And we covered Celo Euro before in our previous call, and now the draft is fine, in the final stages. And I want to move it to last call just so we can begin the review period. But I want to get a feel for the room that we're good to go, like a rough consensus moving it to last call. So yeah, I'm just gonna ask everyone in the call if we're good to go to move it to last call, or if there's any objections. I'll take silence to mean yes, but like I'm waiting if anyone speaks up and has a different opinion. But yeah,
ship it.
Good, yeah. A few more seconds. Okay, cool. So I believe we have now rough consensus to move it to last call. So for the last call, what's the date today? Let me just
the 4th.
4th, right? And we want to move it to, so I'm going to put the review period Thursday the 18th. This is only for the specification. It has nothing to do with the governance proposals around activation or stuff like that. It's only for the spec itself. So we will move it to the 18th, which is 2 weeks from now. Will be, if there's no objection on the 18th, I'll move it to accepted. So it's an accepted specification. All right, cool. I love it when rough consensus happen really smoothly and quickly. Next on the agenda, we have contract release 3. It's a proposal for what will go in the new contract release 3. And I believe we had a good back and forth on the forum about it and stuff. So I'm just going to click on it. Who would be the most suitable person to go over? Is Nam on the call by any chance? Or it's...
I can do it. Yeah, do you want to click into the release notes? Cool. Yeah, so the major theme here is the launch of Celo Euro. And so the first 3 PRs are changes to the reserve and the addition of the exchange euro and stable token euro, which basically generalize the stability protocol to support both the Celo Euro and multiple currencies in future. Kind of as outlined in that CIP 33. And then we have the implementation of CIP 21, which is the basically making the number of consecutive blocks that a validator can miss more lenient. And then CIP 29 is the grace period for the similar score calculation that I think there has also been a lot of discussion around. So I think there shouldn't be anything super controversial here. And then there was a very small change to the governance contract to fix an external view call, which was misbehaving in a edge case. But yeah, those are the scope of the changes. And if there's any questions, happy to answer them.
Yeah, does anyone have any questions? So these are the specifications that we're going to take. I believe it's already been submitted to audit.
Yes, so right now, I believe actually tomorrow we're getting back the report from Open Zeppelin, and then there will be like hopefully a 1 week turnaround where the C Labs team addresses the issues identified in the report, and then we'll kick off the governance timeline maybe in a week or two.
Got it.
This isn't a question so much as a comment, and I think we'll get to this in kind of the fourth item on the agenda, but I just want to make it clear here. The contract, the way the contract releases work is that when new contracts are added, their initial parameters, they need to be initialized with, whatever the required parameters to make that a functional contract would be. And so what this means is that as part of contracts release 3, even though contracts release 3 isn't kind of quote unquote turning on Celo Euro and like activating the Celo Euro stability mechanism, it will need to initialize the Celo Euro contract. Most of the initialization parameters have setters that can be set again before the kind of like token and I guess exchange, the Mento instance, are activated. And so it's like for most of these parameters, like we don't, the contracts release 3 is not the decision point. The one parameter where it is the initial allocation of Celo Euro balances, because that doesn't have a setter, right? It's only set at initialization time. You can't like go back and like govern away or for somebody's balance. And so I know we have that on the agenda, but I just want to make it clear here that those two items are coupled. Just so that, for context for when we actually discuss what those initial Celo Euro balances should be, I want to make it clear that that decision is coupled to the release, the actual deployment of release 3.
So in other words, after moving release 3 to on-chain, the allocation is like a separate component, but it relies on the contract release 3 being on-chain.
No, unfortunately not. So the release 3, part of release 3 will be setting that initial allocation.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and I think Ziviad kind of pointed out in the forum post related to, I guess, this like grace period, how ideally like we would decouple code changes from parameter settings. And I totally agree. And Victor pointed out that like when you create new parameters, like they need values. And that's kind of the like situation we're finding ourselves in here.
Right.
And again, all of the parameters other than the initial balances can be adjusted before Celo Euro is turned on. So like the initial settings don't really matter because Celo Euro is going to be disabled. The only one that can't be adjusted is the initial balances.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Is there any other comments or questions on the contracts release 3? Come on, y'all, we're hoping for a debate.
Okay, just a question. So that initial balance, is that parameter like adjustable later on, or is that set once we set it during this third update?
Sorry, say that again. Is it what before the first part of that?
Can that initial balance be changed later on?
Jakey, did you ask if it can be changed later on?
Yeah, like, so this is, you said like, this upgrade will go, but Celo CUSD is not activated, so it's not doing anything, right? Is my understanding correct?
I hate to say this, I'm not clear because it cut out again.
Yeah.
I turned my video off. Somebody else.
I can answer. The initial allocation within the contract itself is not adjustable later, and that's what ASO was noting.
Yeah, everything else is adjustable later, and importantly, none of the other parameters are actually usable until a follow-up governance proposal which activates Celo Euro. And so all the other parameters could be set to 0 or any value, and it wouldn't make a difference because they're not used until the thing is turned on, and we can bundle kind of the resetting those parameters as part of the like Celo Euro activation proposal. And the only one that's not true for is the initial balances, because we don't want balances to be governable, because that's not how money should work.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
Alrighty, sounds
That's
good.
you, that's not how money should work.
Pardon?
Sorry, it's a lame joke. I was just saying, who says that's not how money should work?
Yes, yeah, you're right. Yep.
Are there any other further comments or questions around contracts release 3?
Oh, what are the kind of expected? So York, I think you said the audit would come back in a week or so. I guess when is this expected to like land on mainnet, assuming everything goes smoothly? Or when is it expected to be proposed?
On mainnet, I can get that date for you right now.
Approximately, like not a concrete date, but are we talking like?
I think early March.
I think I had seen March 2nd, Tuesday, March 2nd.
And I guess related to that, there's a point here that says this necessitates the donut hard fork. Are we saying that the donut hard fork is a blocker for this, or is that just for something unrelated?
It's for CIP 21, which yeah, I think it's for CIP. Oh,
I think it's the other way around. I think we need that change for donut.
Got it. Got it. So this is maybe not necessitates, but it is.
Yeah, I can adjust that. Adjust that wording.
Cool. Phew.
Okay, it seems there's no other comments on this. I also invite you all, if you have any comments or stuff or questions, feel free to add them here. We have an interesting debate. We're hoping Ziad would be here to talk, but I don't think he's in the room. So I think we need to move on to the next item on the list. Okay. We want to do a retrospective on CPP 15 and why we added CPP 21, which should get a referendum stage today. Anna, you want to go over it?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is basically just kind of a small change to the random.sol contract to update the randomness block retention window. And the reason for this is to basically make the purpose of CGP 15, which was already passed, actually work in effect. So for users who request an attestation but fail to select an issuer within the hour, they'll have to wait another 24 hours to perform the attestation. And with this governance proposal, they will have 24 hours from the moment that they request the attestation to select their issuers. And this will solve a problem for like Valora users, basically.
Cool. Yeah, so this one is gonna go, it's gonna be in referendum. I don't know if we hit referendum yet, but it should be in a few hours or so for today. And then everyone can start voting on CGP 21 along with 17, which is the community fund and contracts release to this stuff. Any comments on CGP 21 this stuff? Or questions maybe? I don't know.
Sounds like a good change.
Alrighty, let's move on to the next item on the agenda. All right, Asa, you want to kick off the blog post, the initial allocation of Celo Euro?
Sure. Yeah, I think Marcus and I are going to tag team this one. I'm happy to start off with the forum post. There is a one-time opportunity when launching a new fiat pegged token on Celo to specify some initial balances and to start with an initial supply that is greater than 0. I think there are a few arguments that you could make that this is a good idea for Celo Euro. So kind of just, again, rehashing this forum post, the first argument is that basically the Celo, the like Mento stability mechanism is kind of works to bridge a gap between, supply and demand. And so if there is a non-zero demand, Celo Euro, and to kind of close that gap. And the larger the gap between supply and demand, the harder Mento needs to work. And it's worth noting that Mento is rate limited by the size of the buckets. And so if we have a big gap, if we kind of start off with a big gap between supply and demand, we're just kind of making life harder for the protocol in terms of kind of finding the peg, right? In some sense, like we kind of force the protocol to start off in a depeg state, and then like it needs to kind of catch up to repeg. So I think that's one argument for a non-zero initial supply. Two, a second argument is that the protocol is holding a lot of capital in the reserve right now that's not really being put to good use, right? So capital that is being put to good use is capital that collateralizes the Celo dollar. But there's a lot more capital in the reserve than is needed far more than is needed to collateralize the Celo dollar. And so, putting more stable assets out there that are collateralized by the reserve results in a more effective deployment of that kind of pseudo deployment of that reserve capital. And I think that's something that we all can kind of get behind as like, if the Celo protocol being able to deploy its capital effectively is like good for the network. And I guess finally, and kind of related to that, there is like a clear argument for this capital to be deployed effectively. So like there is, I think we kind of can see a need or a clear use case that this initial supply of Celo Euro could be put towards. The Celo Foundation is kind of on track to give out $6 million US in grants, and that's a combination of CUSD and Celo. And then I think just today, we will be voting on a CGP to take about $2 million US of Celo out of the community fund to kind of further fund projects in the Celo ecosystem, right? So there are opportunities to use Celo currencies to like further the state of the network. And I think we've heard, and Marcus can speak more on this, like we've heard kind of, or there are opportunities in places where the euro is a more useful currency than the dollar or Celo. And so this would kind of help fit that need. So kind of given all that, and given the ways that kind of Celo has and Celo currencies have been kind of used effectively thus far, what I'm proposing for the initial allocation of Celo Euro, which again is coupled to the contracts release 3 that we, I guess we'll all be voting on starting in early March, you know, and part of that will be voting on this. Which is, again, not ideal, but it's just kind of the way the code works right now that these two decisions are coupled. Proposing 6 million Celo Euro going to the Celo Foundation and an additional 2 million Celo Euro to go to the governance contract to be used as part of the community fund. And just looking at the reserve, like this is, there's like not a stability concern with doing this. I think there's, you know, there's like hundreds and hundreds of millions of US dollars worth of capital in the reserve. And so we will like continue to be well and safely over collateralized.
Cool. So yeah, let's, Marcus, do you have any other comments you want to add?
No immediate comments. Very good summary. Yeah, and as Asa said, it's like it's unlocking not only like opportunities in Europe and people who want to hold a stable coin that is pegged to the euro, but there are, for example, a list of African countries that would be potential target markets for Celo stable assets that have currencies that are already pegged to the euro and therefore could use a euro-based stable coin, and therefore it makes a lot of sense to to have euro as the second currency after the Celo dollar.
Got it. Yeah, so I would like to invite, you know, everyone to, you know, further comment on the initial allocation proposal and stuff like that. Now's the time.
I have a question. It seems like a good idea. Overall, I'm for it, but I'm just curious if we've thought about like the precedent this sets, thinking, you know, if we're going to have a certain amount of pre-allocated funds when we launch a new currency, are we expecting this to be like the standard, that every new currency starts with a certain amount, or case by case? Again, I think it's a good idea. Just wondering if we've thought of that.
Yes, it's a fantastic question. We did think a bit about like trying to put together a framework for like how this decision should be made, or like what information can be used to guide future similar decisions, right? Because we're going to be faced with this question every time somebody is proposing adding a new like fiat pegged currency to Celo, and you know, certainly Celo Euro is not going to be the last of these. Ultimately, that is not something that, I guess, because this is bundled with the contracts release 3, and there is kind of like a date that we're working towards on the contracts release 3. I think what we intentionally decided not to try to put that framework together because we wanted to like try to, I guess, get this conversation going and like kind of come to an agreement around what it should look like for Celo Euro, so that contracts release 3 isn't blocked by this decision. I think it will be like a good follow-up item. I'm kind of, this is not a good answer to the question, but very broadly, right? I think it depends on the existing, like a kind of feel for the existing demand, right? Because we want to make sure that the initial supply is like able to satisfy, at least to some degree, some initial demand. And a lot of that comes, I think, from like the strategic opportunity that this new, like a new fiat pegged currency would represent for the Celo ecosystem. And you know, the more kind of specific opportunities that we can point to, the better to kind of guide the amount. So that's one side of it. And then the other side is like the limiting factor being the collateralization ratio, right? So we would never want to, at least from where I stand, we would never want to like propose initial allocations that put undue pressure on the reserve's ability to collateralize that asset, right? So it's like weighing opportunity versus like the stability risk. And I think in this case, like the opportunity feels very clear. Like Celo Euro, there seems to be a big opportunity for Celo Euro in a way that, I don't know, I don't know random, like very obscure fiat currencies, right? But if somebody wants to, I think Merrick maybe use the example of like the Burmese, is it a Burmese dollar? I don't know what it is, right? But like if somebody wanted to launch a Celo currency in Burma, like maybe the opportunity there or the demand there is not as high just because that's a very small locale. And so, you know, accordingly, the initial supply would probably want to be smaller in terms of total value than somewhere where there's a larger opportunity.
Yeah, and maybe to add here, as Asa said, basically the existing demand is one of the cornerstones of like how to determine initial supply. Also, basically the limit that there should be, or it shouldn't change the stability characteristics overall. The nice thing around the Celo reserve is that it basically can work with over collateralization, also with under collateralization, like even central banks sometimes or often have to do. But yeah, it shouldn't, like a prement shouldn't change these stability characteristics. And with this suggested prement, the over collateralization would still be over 10 times over collateralized, which is nice. But there's also a learning curve to it. So now with this prement, we see how, for example, the community fund would put these like prement to good use, like what the community decides on, what these funds can do. And there are like a lot of opportunities for future prements. You could even imagine that the community fund like uses the prement for like assets that the community really wants, maybe even added to the reserve, and purchases it with a prement. Like there's a lot of potential ways how community fund and Celo Foundation can like put these prement to good use within the community. And therefore there's also a learning curve within these cornerstones, as I mentioned.
I just wanted to add a small piece of information. Just checked, and the reserve balance counting only the unfrozen Celo is $217 million.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for walking us through your thinking there. I think that all makes sense. And yeah, particularly around Marcus's point that this is sort of like a learning opportunity. Very curious to just, follow everything here and see how things develop.
Alrighty. Yeah, so any further comments on the proposal, 6 million Celo Euro going to the Celo Foundation and 2 million to the community fund?
I just had two questions, and sorry, my name's Ron and I'm a bit of a rookie, so you'll have to forgive any naivety here, but was there a pre-mint for the Celo US dollar?
That's a fantastic question. Yes, 5 million to the Celo Foundation, which has been kind of deployed as various grants and loans and other things. And I think I unfortunately don't have like a list that I know of or can share. I want to say I heard, yeah, it's a great question. My impression is that it's been used like pretty effectively. And I think the kind of need should only be greater as kind of the Celo network has grown, right? So that was something that was done, you know, almost a year ago at this point, and kind of we've come a long way since then. And so like the opportunities to deploy this capital are bigger than they were back then, which is why the kind of small increase over that 5 million.
So I think, yeah, there was an initial balance of, I think, I'm not sure, 5 million for Celo dollars. And then I think, was it you, Marcus, mentioned that 6 million of Celo dollars have been given out in total by the foundation to date. I know that there's been more minting of dollars since. So that gives you, I mean, that gives you an approximate estimate or benchmark, if that helps.
Yeah, I think it's 6 million US dollar of Celo and Celo dollars that have been given out as grants, or that's what the foundation is on track to hit by the 1-year anniversary of Celo launch.
So I guess the issue here is kind of creating a precedence of these pre-mints, which is kind of a subjective process and will require, you know, further governance in future. Have you considered the idea of having a one-off fiat purchase where you basically just do a one-off purchase with fiat in order to seed, and you use that as a basis? I don't know, that might be a terrible idea, but I just thought I'd suggest it.
No, it's a reasonable idea, right? There, like you could imagine kind of in a like somewhat trusted way, setting up an arrangement where either the foundation or anybody really like sends funds to the reserve. It's kind of like a pre-mento, right? In this, where you would like send some money to the reserve in the, you know, Bitcoin, ETH, or Celo in exchange for like an initial allocation of Celo Euro. It's I guess it would be the like OTC, you know, OTC is to that approach as like an exchange is to Mento, if that makes sense. You know, before kind of Mento is up and running. I think what that misses is the piece that misses is like the this second point around like trying to deploy the capital held by the reserve more efficiently, right? So that actually doesn't, you know, that doesn't help address that problem, right? And I think there's an argument to be made, which is that being like 20 or 30x over collateralized is a bad thing, because there's a lot of capital that's not being used effectively. And so in some sense, this pre-mint is like, it is a way to leverage that capital. Does that make sense?
Seems a little bit indirect, the use of the capitalization argument. I mean, go ahead, sorry.
I just thought maybe I'll just add a few comments to Ace, and then like that you can respond in one. By the way, I'm Claire, I'm PM on the protocol platform team. I think one thing is fiat to crypto is an issue. So it can be fiat in exchange for crypto, right? The on-off ramp, the KYC, all of that. So that would be the first one. And then I had another thought, which now I've lost track on. Yeah, on the governance side. So absolutely, I think, you know, how do we make this more governable? And there's always this trade-off of how do we move fast and how do we learn versus how do we make this governable? And I think that the way like we were thinking about it and like how we're seeing other networks operate is start a bit more where we can move faster. So like the foundation would have the majority of the pre-mint at this stage where the decisions can happen faster versus doing a 1 week on-chain governance, but already starting to learn by putting some of the pre-mint into the community fund. And then ideally moving forward, you know, this could all go on chain and get governed in a more structured way.
Ronan, it did sound like you had more questions about that like second argument though, and I don't want to like, I'm like happy to keep talking about that.
Well, sounds like you're thinking about some collateralization questions, and I'm just wondering if there are some issues there. Maybe they should be dealt with in a different way than using pre-mints to solve it. But sorry, I don't really have enough depth in order to give you more on that.
No, it's, I think you nailed it in the sense that like, it's a supporting, I guess it's a supporting argument for why an like initial allocation of Celo Euro is a good idea, and not like this is like the one way in which we will kind of, I don't want to say solve the problem because it's not a problem, right? But like basically all of the capital that the reserve is holding that is in excess of what's needed to collateralize the fiat tokens that are already minted is more or less doing nothing to help the Celo protocol. And I guess my point is that this moves us a small step forward on that front, because it means that more of the capital being held by the reserve would be being used to collateralize fiat currency as opposed to like nothing, right? And I think there's an argument to make that like any capital over a certain kind of collateralization factor is more or less not useful sitting in the reserve.
And maybe to add to a point both of you mentioned, like this minting a larger amount of stablecoin can be a useful feature. Of course, like the whole stability protocol is set up in a way that it always like very directly links supply of stablecoin to current demand of stablecoin. So it can basically on the fly be expanded and contracted. In the beginning, when a new coin comes out, as Asa mentioned, there's like non-zero demand hitting zero supply if there wouldn't be a pre-mint. But what you've mentioned, this like OTC addition to the reserve part that Mento is, would actually be a nice feature we are starting to think about and researching how that could be added in a way that it like keeps the stability features of the overall protocol, but adds a facility where you could mint larger amounts at once, and maybe even mint larger amounts at once directly via other cryptocurrencies, basically, so that you don't have like the problem of touching fiat in any sense. And this is, I think, a feature we start to think about, like how could this be added. It's probably not a feature we would have in place for the launch of Celo Euro, but something that can always be added. And if someone has like thoughts or ideas, always feel free also to ping me.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in and say, because somebody I think mentioned standardization. If anyone has any idea for how would you go about allocating like a standard around allocation for future currencies and stuff, we also have a process for standardization of things within the protocol, and like we're always accepting new proposals and stuff, and we can talk about them as well within the governance call and within the all core dev call with anything related to the protocol and stuff. So I'm always open to new ideas and new proposals coming into the the specification of the protocol, and I think that would be an interesting kind of like thing to at least take a stab at it and kind of attempt to standardize what allocation would look like for future currency, if that's something that is interesting for you.
Yeah, I would love to see a framework for how these sorts of decisions should be made in the future. I would prefer not to block the Celo Euro launch on that framework being in place, so long as we can like agree on what a reasonable kind of like approach to this without a like clearly defined framework is.
Yeah, I think it's like, yeah, very reasonable to try to attempt to standardize it for future currency. Definitely not for Celo Euro right now. Because I mean, like Euro as a currency, pretty stable, right? Yeah,
I think,
yeah, go for it.
you know, as a rookie, that all sounds fine, and you'd have to move fast. I think I would be worried though if there's a lot of pre-minting or just minting in general in different places. Like from the outside, it just looks like there's not. I mean, there needs to be tight control of minting. Really, it should be very clear to outsiders where minting happens, and why it happens, and it just becomes very difficult to track that if there's. Now with multiple, you know, stable currencies in the future, there's potentially almost limitless sources of minting.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think like they're rightly so, this is like a sensitive topic, and I think why we want to talk about it early and often. To be clear, like, so the kind of minting, other than Mento, which, you know, necessarily mints new tokens as part of the stability protocol, but people buy them, so it kind of it hopefully shouldn't be very controversial. Other than that, the only time minting happens is or is possible to happen is in the introduction of a token, and so hopefully it should be like yeah, particularly once we have that framework in place, like hopefully it should be pretty clear that these are like very like confined events and not something that can like happen on a continual basis.
And for validator rewards.
Yes, and for validator rewards.
I wanted to make one suggestion. If we still have some time, yes, are we still good on time on this? Yep. Around, and this kind of shifting gears a little bit from whether or not there's an amount minted and how much is minted to what to do once it's minted. And this is just a thesis that I'll document and put out for feedback. But I think that it would be a very interesting experiment to identify a community, perhaps a geographically isolated community, and aim to essentially get very deep penetration of adoption of, we'll say, Celo Euros within this, you know, let's say it's an island community of some sort. You know, perhaps starting with a small remote and you know, small both geographically as well as from a population perspective, but perhaps with a high penetration of cell phone use, and essentially just doing an airdrop, an on the ground airdrop to an entire community, and see if we can in fact like stimulate a network effect. The thesis being that if we're able to give everybody an initial supply, then we kind of solve the chicken and egg problem of you know, who's like of the network effect. And there's lots of island nations that use the euro, and could be an interesting kind of test to run to see if this is a way to essentially purchase market share that then expands out from there, right? Like getting the initial user base. It was a thought that I had, and I think it would be an interesting experiment to run. And don't have to have a deep conversation on it now. I'll type it up in the forum, but I wanted to throw it out there.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, I really like the idea. I think like we've done pilot tests and case studies in the past, so I think it's like a really great kind of suggestion. In the interest of time, I invite everyone to continue the conversation on Celo Euro. It seems to me there's not too much of reservation on the specific allocation, just on like, you know, precedents and stuff. And I think that can be isolated as a standardized kind of approach within the CIP process. Ronan, if you want to learn more about the CIP process, just email me. I'm yaz@culabs.co. I'm more than happy to talk about it. All right, we need to go to the next item on the agenda in the interest of time. Sorry. Okay, we have a new incident report overview. Anyone from the CAPS team can go over it. Not sure who reported it. Nam did, right?
Yes. We discovered a bug in our deployment of release gold contracts. And I think that basically the root cause is that if you use the proxy pattern, the implementation contract could be vulnerable to self-destruction if said contract has a call to that opcode. We discovered it quickly, initialized all implementation contracts in release gold so that other people couldn't call the functions on the release gold implementation contract itself to ensure that, like basically those funds wouldn't be stuck at no point in time where the fund's at risk because the storage is held on the proxy contract. But it would have been pretty painful to kind of recover the funds because we would have to have both the release owner and the beneficiary basically repoint to a new implementation contract. And so as part of going forward, we will ensure that future release gold deployments basically initialize implementation off the bat to avoid kind of, like exploitation of that bug in the future. But to our knowledge, all release gold deployments have been covered, and happy to answer any questions.
Just to add my take on this, I think that it wasn't even necessarily the case that release gold contracts were vulnerable, but it was a basically like the modifiers which restrict the functions, which do have these self-destruct opcodes, behaved differently when the implementation contracts were not initialized. And so it was more of like confirming that this fix was basically confirming that we weren't vulnerable to this like type of vulnerability, but I'm not even really convinced that anyone could have exploited this. Just that the security, or rather the permission modifier on the release gold contract would have behaved in an unexpected way.
All right, cool. Anyone has any questions on the incident report? You can read more about it as well on the forum, and it's linked to the agenda if you want to learn more about it. All right. What are we doing? All right, on time, we got 8 more minutes. Let's see. The final topic, NAM proposed a really cool governance proposal, community appreciation gifts. NAM, you want to kick it off?
Yes, I have been working on Celo for the better part of close to 2.5 years now. And of course, like a lot of, I think the work that has happened in regards to the Celo platform, Celo community has started within C Labs. But I think really early on, we've had really exciting community engagement and people who, while not officially being paid by C Labs, we're working with the Celo community and on the Celo platform. And I think over time, it's always been kind of like, I felt a little bad, to be honest, about like those people kind of giving a lot of kind of their time, their resources, their skills to kind of this community, while I think at least officially not getting anything in return. And so at C Labs, we have internally, we have this program we call the Golden Coin Award, where basically when you see people kind of going above and beyond and just kind of helping each other out, we kind of take it as a small like token of gratitude to kind of call that out as a sense of appreciation for their contributions. And I figured it might be a nice idea and try to do that within the greater context of the Celo community. And so as you can tell from the CGP, I don't have like a super great idea of what it will actually look like or how it will be in practice. But my proposal was effectively to ask for a small amount of Celo that a gift steward could then basically distribute to community members who could be nominated in kind of all kinds of fashions. Like I think originally it might be nice to just start with reaching out to the steward and just nominate some people. But I think there's a lot of individuals that I think have proven themselves to be great contributors, and I would love to kind of express that appreciation on behalf of the wider Celo community.
Awesome. Yeah. So just as Nam kind of like, MVP wanted to kind of look like, and then, I think it's like a good opportunity for people within the community to comment on it. I think it's a really good idea, considered with like gift giving and stuff. And I'm kind of curious, anyone had thoughts on it and stuff.
One of the thoughts, which is super tactical, is if one person has the responsibility for distributing this for the rest of the community, are there legal implications for that person in terms of giving money? I wouldn't expect so, but we might just want to consider that. And I wonder if that makes the argument of more of a multi-sig kind of wallet than a single person having that right. And maybe for these amounts, it's not an issue.
You might get some help from the approval, like the fact that I guess technically the steward doesn't need to hold these funds ever. It's just kind of the proposal, it looks like, is giving permission to the steward to direct funds out of the community fund. I don't know if that is meaningfully different from a legal perspective, because I'm very far from a lawyer. But yeah. I love this idea. It's not clear to me, Nam, if you're proposing that you start off playing this role. It wasn't clear to me if that was part of the proposal. I would prefer that it was part of that proposal, if it's not.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I just created this proposal because I want this to happen. I am by no means tied to being that steward. I'm very happy for other people to come forward and play that role as well. But I think in the absence of it, I'm also happy to play that role. Claire, good point. I am right now just hoping that won't be an issue. I'm kind of following the great folks of CGP 17 who seem to also not have that to be an issue. So, and they have more money. So I assume if the IRS is going to come after someone, it's going to be them first.
Yeah, just to comment on that part, we will let you know, Nam and the team, what we decide. If when the vote goes through, that's when we plan to like sit with Jay and Jake, the legal team, on like Celo Foundation, as well as like our own like legal consultants to figure out if we do need an entity, or because we don't actually hold the money, we don't know yet. So we'll let you know what comes out of that.
Cool. Any other comments on CPP 20?
I think one comment about who should be doing this, or who should the steward be talking to give these grants would be nice to maybe like people who interact with the community in a regular basis. I'm thinking of like Yaz knows a lot of community people, Jarl knows a lot of like community people on the like application side of things. So whoever the steward is, they would also work with these people to find out like, okay, like who's been like really helpful for the community. Of course, we can also crowdsource this.
Yeah, I definitely would say, I mean, this is part of like what I would love to have feedback on, like, right? Like, should there be like public nomination process? Should there just be like everyone DMs the steward? Like, honestly, no idea. Happy to hear feedback. I think I like what Ziad said last time, which is we should just put the fund to good use. And it feels like no better use than to give people who've already given themselves to the community to give them a small token of appreciation. And so I hope that I suspect that we have more money than people that will be nominated. And so I think if anything, pretty much like if you have anyone in mind, just nominate them.
Yeah. I feel public nomination process would make a lot more sense to me, like maybe on like a Discord channel or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe like a Discord bot where you just be like nominate username, and then that goes into like we have like a nomination. Or maybe I'm overthinking it, who knows? But there are some comments in the chat about maybe 25 They're like 2.5K Celo might not be enough, because if you do the math, that's 25 grand, gifts given if you're assuming 100 Celo each. And maybe, after a while, you potentially, if we like this program, we might want to ask for more. So maybe like potentially higher than 25 Celo, 2.5 thousand Celo would be good.
Yeah, I'm always happy to up the amount. I mostly just wanted to get it going, and I figured like a small amount would be non-controversial. But if people seem generally on board with the idea, I'm happy to increase the amount as well. And I also, of course, like any increase in the amount can always be done later by additional proposals. But yeah, happy to increase the amount.
Yeah, but it's like somewhat inconvenient, right? And so it's like really a question of like risk tolerance, right? Like whoever is going to be in control of these funds, like, is there a concern that they're going to do a bad thing with them? And like how much risk there are you willing to tolerate? And I feel like I feel like we can tolerate a lot more risk, because the risk I feel like is very low, and it's worth kind of avoiding. It's worth delaying the point at which we would need to make another proposal to increase that. And because it's approval and not a transfer, if for some reason, more is approved than is actually useful, like nothing needs to be done.
Yeah, I was more thinking, I mean, maybe people know by now that I'm a pretty conservative guy, and I don't know if I feel super comfortable with a single key holding, or like at least having spending power in that amount. And so if there are additional people who are interested in being stewards, then maybe doing it into a multi-sig, but at least make me feel more comfortable increasing the amount.
I'm thinking like maybe to start off, we can allocate approve the amount that would require somebody to register a validator group, which is 10K, 10,000 Celo. That would be about 100 gifts, right? Give or take, depending if you want to go stick to 100 Celo for each gift. And honestly, if we find 100 people in the community to give a gift to, I think we should consider ourselves really lucky that we have a really awesome community, and that we can get to 100 or stuff. But yeah, that's my opinion.
Cool. Yep. I know we have time, so everyone, please comment on the forum post. We'd love to see both suggestions for amounts, people, stewards, and we can take it from there.
Right. Sounds good. Yeah. So comment on it. If you go up, there's a forum post for the community discussions on CVP 20. I think we're at time. We're 1 minute over time, and I'm gonna stop. Let me see. All right. Well, so yeah, I'm gonna stop recording. So thank you everyone for another governance call that went, I think, really well. And I really appreciate everyone in the community coming here to participate. We're so excited about Celo Euro and all the other proposals happening, and catch you again later.